And I'd like to welcome everyone to the Light Board meeting for September 13th. First on the agenda is upcoming meetings. We'll have our next meeting on October 11th, followed by November 8th. We are not going to go over minutes quite yet today, so we will move on to the director's update. Dave, would you like to take it from here?
Sure, Brian, before we get into the updates, just want to note the special meeting in December for the budget.
Okay.
And I think what we're looking at for that is probably like the 20th of December. So I think that's the only time that's going to work, just the way the schedule falls. So if you guys could just keep that in the back of your mind, we'll send an email out to confirm that we can get a quorum and whatnot. And then at the next meeting, I'll send out the schedule for next calendar year of when the regular meetings will be scheduled.
Great. That sounds like a good plan. On that note, I know that usually in November we review the new rates for the next year.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that that doesn't get pushed to the last minute where we're up against the December timeframes. And so to get that done early would be helpful.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
I just want to say I may or may not be able to join on October 11th. I'll do my best, but I may not be able to. My daughter's having a baby.
Oh, congratulations.
They'll be out in Colorado.
Okay.
Depending on where things are, I will join.
All right. That sounds good. And I'm going through agenda topics, and I may in the next quarter ask for an additional meeting to kind of keep us going on agenda topics and make sure we're answering the questions asked in as timely manner as we can. So I don't know if it's needed, so that's TBD. All right. Dave, your update. How'd the storm go?
So we had a storm response last Friday, which I included in the update. It was pretty busy. We had around 800 customers without power after the storm rolled through. Major tree damage throughout town. A lot of the trees that came down were far too big for our crews to handle, so we brought in a tree company with a crane and had them start removing the trees so that we could rebuild the system. We had that 800 customers. The bulk of it was in the Monument Street, Lowell Road area. That was all out. We had that all back on in the first 12 hours. Well, most of that back on in the first 12 hours, which was about 87% of the outages. And then, we had other areas in town that were, damaged pretty good. We had primaries down on roads that we had to rebuild. Based on the severity and the amount of outages that were spread across on the remaining, we did use NEPA's mutual aid system and got crews in from Merrimack, Marblehead, and Holden. They each sent a truck with 2 line workers. So we had additional 6 line workers helping us out, which was good. That really, helped the end response. Our last outage was restored on Sunday evening, and that was at the Finn School. The reason why that was out as long as it was is because it required a pole set, and that's in the Verizon set area. So they set the pole on Sunday, and we were able to get working and reattach the transformers and the rest of the distribution system and turn them back on. So all in all, it was busy, a lot of hours, but the crews did a great job. That's really it on the storm. I can pause there and see if you guys have any questions before I move on.
No, I know personally, I was driving to the high school waiting to pick up my kids so they didn't have to walk home in it. and it was fierce. It was short storm. It only lasted half an hour, but the wind and the heavy rain really hit. And I also know my mother and sister are in national grid territories, and my sister was out of power for a good 36 hours, because and she lived near the center of the old center of North Andover. So the response from the MLP groups is great. The mutual aid is appreciated, and I'm glad we receive it and we support it. It's a good system of resilience.
I can personally speak to being without power for a long period of time during it, being in national grid territory. So, it is what it is. But all in all, the crews did a great job, and really appreciative of the work they did and the hours they put in. It was a lot on the staff, and as it stands right now, we're really keeping our eye on the hurricane that's coming up the coast, and Joe and I will be talking about staging and what we might need to do. So hopefully I won't be emailing you guys all weekend again, but yeah, it was a lot. Jason's going to talk to the broadband during his update, so I'm going to leave that out for now. In terms of the irony here is we have a topic on this next the renewable energy credits in a minute, but we did procure our first wave of renewable energy credits for calendar year 23. Last week, we got 20,000 mass class 1 RECs, which is part of the process that we follow. The value of those was about 787,000. In the report, I put a couple charts in there from the website just to help you guys as you talk about the renewable energy credits in the next topic or the topic after. But you'll see that 99% of the sales for calendar year 22 are carbon free based on the contracts and the purchase of credits. So we're doing very well there for calendar year 23. On that chart, it shows that the sales will be 104%. Obviously, we're not going to buy more than we need, so there'll be some excess there. And I think that's where the topic you guys are going to talk about will address. And as you look at that, the second chart, it shows you the contracts, and it also shows the renewable energy credit. So I think it's a good visual for where we were and where we're going and where we're going to be. So smart meter project, we installed the first 10 meters, and we're in the testing phase of that now, seeing how everything's tying in with software and integrating with NISC. So very pleased about that. We have Eaton on site this week. They're working with our team on training and software setup. So yesterday was the first day. So far so good. They'll be back this morning, probably around 9, and we'll get moving with the rest of that. I'd mentioned at the last meeting the bucket truck, it's scheduled to come in this week. I didn't put it in the report, but I spoke with Jay in our fleet department, and it's all done. It's completed. We will be looking at potential cost increase of just over 20,000 based on steel. So we'll have to do a change order for that. And this is where we are now with pretty much a lot of the products that we buy. They bid it, and then with the steel prices going through the roof, they'll do a change order and we'll adjust it. So it was like 23,000, and it's a decent chunk, but at the end of the day, it's replacing a 1992 vehicle.
I was going to say, yeah,
we need it, and we'll work through those details.
In the change, the 20,000 or 23,000 for additional steel is based on the vehicle, right? It's the yeah. So And this is a 30-year-old vehicle. What happens with the old vehicle? Is it traded in? Is it decommissioned or
No, it's traded in. So the trade-in value of that vehicle is about $4,000, which is,
low?
it's low, but our experience with that is if we put it out to bid, we have to be really careful with liabilities and things like that because of the aerial lift and all the hydraulics and whatnot. So,
So trade-in gets rid of the liability problem.
yeah, then the dealer can deal with that. So we've done it both ways. In this particular case, with the vehicle being 30 years old, it doesn't owe us a dime. It's done its work. So
Yeah.
it'll be traded in. And then the last thing, and I didn't put in the report, was 300 Baker Avenue. We've been working with them for, maybe 24 months at this point on the project over there. Some of the board members may recall they're looking to put solar in a battery. So we met with them again last week. So this is for the 300 Baker Ave portion. They're looking to put about 3/4 of a megawatt on the roof and working with a third party on a battery system. So kind of partnering with them. And we did a field meeting. We also have to be careful and tie it in with the potential 40B project that's going on over there, where they're putting in 2 buildings with apartment complexes and subdividing the parcel so that everything's coordinated. But that's going well. And that's about it for me.
Okay. Is 30 Baker Ave still considering installing the megawatt plus canopy over that big parking area?
No, they took that off the table a while ago.
Okay.
So it's just rooftop at this point. Part of the project is to put a parking garage on the parcel. And that was where some of the canopy was. And I can't say that's why they decided to get rid of the canopy.
Mhm.
But I know it would impact that. So no canopy, just rooftop.
All right. Would they be open to a front of meter canopy over any garage that they build? That would,
Well, we have a coordination meeting with 300 Baker Ave coming up, and I'm sure we're going to get into that. I
okay.
called for that meeting because there's so many different people working on it. You got the storage, you got 300 Baker Ave, then you have the apartment complexes. So, based on the field meeting, it was apparent that we all needed to get together and have a discussion. So I can ask that question, Brian, in that
Yeah.
meeting, and see where they are.
And will Eric Sims be in that conversation as well? I think he gets pinged a lot on that property. So it'd be good for him to be up to date.
Yeah, we'll include him on that. I don't know what his availability is going to be, but he'll be in the loop the whole way.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the recs and more and later in the agenda. And it's great to hear that the 10 meters are in on the smart meter deployment. And that's still going according to schedule with that 3-week delay for the software that happened.
I would say we are behind.
Okay.
Because of the integration between the billing software and the smart meter company, but we're moving in the right direction now. So, everything's being tested, and once we are satisfied with the testing results of the software and the meters reporting back, then we'll start that next piece, which I mentioned a couple of weeks ago about, installing in a set area, making sure everything's going well, and making sure we know what the bugs are, and then we're going to really ramp it up after that. So, to get through the first piece, I'm pretty happy we're there, and I'm happy that Eaton's here doing training because staff needs it. So,
yeah,
it feels like we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I personally have been waiting a long time for this project to happen, but I want it to happen right. So although I want you to meet a deadline, I want you to get it done right. That's the priority is making sure that we go step by step and don't get in front of our skis and screw up something and go back.
Yeah, and that's really what we're trying to do. we don't want to have, 2,000 of these meters deployed and find out, oops, we got to go back and fix this. So we're really
Right.
taking a methodical approach and making sure we do it right.
Get a small group in, test them, try to break them, figure out what goes wrong, and then deploy. Any other board members have questions about the update for Dave or any other related topics? Looks like we're good. So, Jason, would you like to provide your update?
Absolutely. I'll start with the storm update since Dave touched on that. Again, I want to echo his appreciation for the staff at CMLP. Everybody did a fantastic job and was very collaborative. Specifically, Dave, Joe, Mike, the customer service team, the engineers, everybody was helpful with information, going two ways so that we could help respond more quickly. We keep an on-call technician 24/7, 365. That person this weekend was Rob, and I'd like to give a huge thanks to Rob. Rob was there every day this weekend and all day yesterday, or Monday rather, getting everything up and running, and did a fantastic job. We also have a contract with a fiber pulling and splicing company for emergency response if there's a big problem like this. They have a 4-hour guaranteed response time during any emergency. And they were there all 3 days as well, helping along with our team pulling and preparing for splicing fiber. So that was great. We got incredibly lucky. Dave mentioned the Monument Street and Lowell Road areas. There were some really big trees there, but the primary and secondaries caught those and they didn't damage the communication line. So we showed about 200 customers out at the peak, and based on the alarms, it looked like about 160 of them were power related and maybe 40 of them were fiber broken. Your ONT that you might have at your house has a capacitor in it with a little bit of electricity. And when the electricity to your ONT goes out, it sends one last packet to say, hey, I'm going offline now. And so that usually tells us that the power is out. And then the other type of alarm is just like suddenly something just goes missing. So usually they correlate to those outcomes, but sometimes it's a little murky. So it's hard for us to predict that. But that information is useful for the electric side too, just in knowing where those customers are. So our capabilities have advanced a lot in terms of being able to map these quickly and overlay them with the power outage customers. So that was incredibly helpful. We got, as I mentioned, we were lucky. We thought maybe up to 40 customers were damaged. It was actually fewer than 10 whose fiber was damaged. Unfortunately, they were places that required completely repulling large amounts of fiber, but that is a really good sign in terms of not having hundreds or over 1,000 customers, out due to something. If it was a backbone fiber that, maybe fed a large number of customers. The Bayberry Road area was the biggest for us, where we had 3 customers down as a result of a single tree. But every other location was a 1 or a 2 where a small limb might have pulled something off of the house. So we also have to wait until conditions are safe and the electric crews have pulled power lines back to these houses. So there's a lot of coordination and planning that went into that. So I think, let's see. Yeah, that was pretty much my storm update. We got, I'd say every day we finished in a good place. Friday night, we could do very little because the town was still so torn up. There were still wires on the ground, trees on places. But Saturday, we got up a few customers, Sunday up a few customers and prepared the last bit. And then Monday, we finished everything. And we can't have crews and buckets if there's winds over 30 miles an hour. We can't have splicing crews out when there's lightning strikes. So we had to time everything with the storms that continued all weekend. So that was a challenge as well. In non-storm related news, we are recruiting for a network engineer. That's going well. We have a candidate who will be doing an interview in the next week, and we continue to receive applications. We're also using our LinkedIn recruiter to find and identify candidates, and Dale has been reaching out to people through that means. We are also, which kind of coincides with the storm update, we're also researching, testing, and probably procuring soon a tool that will better allow us to have visibility into the ONTs for customers, so that a lot of the mapping that I mentioned, we've gotten good at doing it, but it's an incredibly manual process. And if as we offer faster and faster speeds and we see the uptake in those speeds, we have to do a little bit more resource planning, whereas before, if you have 10 customers sharing a single fiber line and they all have a very low speed of internet, you're not so worried about that. But when suddenly 3 of those customers want a gig, you have to make sure that you can deliver on what you're selling. So that requires a little bit more research into equipment upstream from the customers. And this tool, which is made by the hardware vendor that makes the ONTs and the network equipment we have, allows for visibility into all of that in real time and lets you run reports for 24 hours, 7 days, whatever, to look at utilization. And so that's going to help with both our response for outages and for planning as we continue to grow the network. So I'm excited about that. We actually had the tool in a light version for the last year, and it's been fantastic and indispensable. So we're looking into sort of the full version of it now. And then I did prepare a letter that I'm going to be sending to Megan Zamuto, the deputy town manager, about the Novo development. We talked about that at our last meeting. Just wanted to make sure that we were clear in our desire for a partnership at the ground floor, so that we got all of our conduit and everything that we'll need to serve all those potential customers, in the development phase, as opposed to waiting until the building is built and then thinking about it after the fact. So I'm excited to partner with them and work with that group so that we make sure we can sign up all those potential customers. And I think that's my last update.
Great, that's awesome. On the Nova apartment project, should the town establish some kind of bylaw that says, if you're building a multifamily house or structure, that you put this infrastructure in? Is that something appropriate, something that the town could do, so that it doesn't have to be, oh, we heard you're doing a project and jump in? It could be they're designing a project and they read the rules, and that's where they engage us. Is that appropriate?
So that's part of the planning process, Brian, and we currently do that. So when our engineers will design the feeds to the building, they'll add conduit on that for fiber. But what Jason's talking about is not just having the conduit so we have a path, but having the conduit and the fiber into the building in the beginning, so that we can then pick up the apartments as people want service. So
yeah, should this be something we talk to the planning board about, where if
staff does that already? Yeah.
What's that?
The staff does that already.
Oh, so the staff does it, but there's no, what I'm thinking is that if their architects are designing the building, they read the bylaws and on the zoning and the planning and also the building. I'm missing all those words in my head right now.
When you get into code, is that what you're saying, Brian?
What's that?
Putting the building code.
Yeah, well, the building code I know is managed by the state, and we can't affect that. So, but we can do certain bylaws like incentivize buildings to put that last segment infrastructure into the building itself. I mean, staff does a great job of getting the conduit to the building, but
So that's a requirement as part of our stuff that comes out of light plant, that they have the conduit in.
Okay.
So what we try and do is we can bring the fiber in and land it, but we've tried to have people in the past pre-wire their building.
Mm-hmm.
So getting involved early on, as Jason's talking about, is really what allows us to pick up more customers. So we're not going to not have fiber there. We're not going to not have connectivity, but it's a matter of getting them on board so that they know we're an option.
Yeah, and I equate it to putting when people construct a new single family structure, making sure that there's a 240 volt outlet in the garage, so that EV charging can be something that's done, because you don't have to retrofit the building. Like if you build it today and then you get an EV next year, you already have the outlet. If the standard spec building construction requires that they put in that outlet. So just making sure that those kind of infrastructure things are in the process. It sounds like you've got a process and it works. So great.
We do.
And also on the storm, a great picture of the Trion Monument, Jason, in your update. And those backbone fiber that we have going, that multiple customers get on. When we have outages, those are the ones we tend to hear about. It's like, oh, we broke this fiber it treats 10 customers. It's kind of like the distribution system. When a line goes down on the street, you may get everybody beyond that point losing connection. What can be done to make those more resilient to storms and squirrels in particular?
Yeah, so I think the fact that we did the tree trimming that we did this year was extremely helpful. Dave did mention to me that that includes the municipal space where the fiber usually is run. So, you know, this could have been much, much worse had we not done the tree trimming that we do annually. And I think, you know, the other question that I had, and that I think is a good starting point for our negotiation, is we're negotiating our franchise agreement with Comcast right now. And we have trees that are definitely in the communication space, even though they might have been cleared from the electrical space. But those limbs, if they're large enough, could impact fiber, could also take down a whole pole if, you know, the whole tree gets pulled down. And so requiring Comcast and you know, Verizon to chip in for some of that to get that off of there, because it's not only a liability for the potential wires and the poles, but also introducing rodents into the wire space and making it easier for them to just happen to be there. It's definitely not a good thing. And I know our crews are incredibly frustrated when they have to pull fiber through trees. It just makes it so much more difficult. So, you know, getting the trees out of the way is a nice thing. Making sure conduit is sealed in areas. You know, we had a rodent issue almost 2 years ago in December where it chewed through a ton of fiber, you know, the 96, 248s, the 12. It was a lot of fiber. And, you know, we went through methodically and sealed all the conduit to all of our LCCs around town. And so doing things like that certainly helps. But we have issues where, you know, we've gone back 3 times to the same place because of rodents just being able to chew through or find another area into a space. So it feels like a cat and mouse game sometimes, but I think the proactive things we're doing are definitely helping and cutting down on the chances for a big break.
Excellent. Any other questions from board members about broadband? All right. Moving on to the second meter discussion. Dave, would you like to take this?
Yeah, sure. So at the last meeting, the board voted on a second meter charge. So making progress in terms of moving forward. And I think the last piece to it is figuring out where that applies and where it doesn't, right? So we have multiple scenarios, and I think we need to hopefully put this to bed today. That would be my goal, so we can move on. But we have different scenarios. And you know, we need to talk about it so that we know where we're going to apply that lower second meter charge and where we're not. In July, I believe I sent around a document that shows the scenarios that we have, and
Can you share that document?
I can. Yep.
Be great.
And let me get that up. Oops. Hold on a second. And is it up?
I see a Word document. It is quite small, though. If you could, yeah, there you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember this document.
Me neither.
Maybe it wasn't sent around.
It was definitely distributed, but that's okay because I've updated it since.
Okay.
So we can just go through this, and this is currently what we have for scenarios. So the first one, and you guys have heard me say this numerous times, it's a main house with a detached garage. So it has 2 services to it. Currently, it's 2 full meter charges because they have 2 accounts. Same thing with a main house with a guest house. Again, 2 accounts, 2 meter charges. Then a main house with a sub metering. That scenario is 1 meter charge. We haven't charged for the second meter. Main house with a separate service for EV. Currently that's 2 full meter charges. Multimeter, all collected line side. So those are all multiple meter charges. And example I would give on that would be a multi-dwelling unit where you have a service coming in and it's feeding 4 different apartments, something like that. So each account would have its own meter charge. Same thing with the multi-dwelling units. The commercial office building with multi-metering banks. So that's very similar to the multi-dwelling units. It's 1 meter charge per account. A duplex, same thing, 2 meter charges because there's 2 accounts there. Temporary services that we have, those are 1 meter charge per temp account. We have a couple scenarios where we have a main house and a separate service to a pool house. Currently, that's 2 full meter charges. Main house with an office, a home office, depending on how it's wired, it's 2 full meter charges, 1 commercial, 1 residential. We don't have a lot of those, but we do have that scenario. This next one is a unique scenario. We have a house that has four services going to it. It's a very large house. So this is not normal. We don't, this house has a kitchen with its own meter, and they have a private chef and so on and so forth. So very unique, but that one has 4 different meter charges. We have had 2 family houses that are converted into a single family, and they opted to keep the 2 meters from the multi-metering unit. So they have 2 meter charges as well. Primary metering, that's 1 metering charge. Everything beyond the meter.
Recording in progress.
Bill, do you mind muting?
So
Sorry, Phil, I need you to mute.
I muted him.
Thank you.
And then, this is more of the same similar situation, multiple services. We went through all this in the upper piece, and then yeah, so the other one that's included here that I haven't spoken to is at the hospital in the John Cummings building. There's a bank of meters in there, and they all get a meter charge per account. So those are the scenarios that we have. And in terms of where we have the reduced meter charge for the second meter, we need to figure out and vote on where that applies.
Okay, so to simplify, this is great, this list of scenarios. I haven't seen this before, but this is a great listing of all of these things. The underlying idea of when 2 meter charges would be applied is when there's 2 line drops from the pole. Is that correct?
That's the way it has been, yes. So when there's 2 line drops coming in, you would have 2 different accounts, and there would be 2 meter charges. Likewise, if you come into a structure that has a multi-meter bank and there's multiple accounts, each account would have a meter charge. So that's where I use the condo or multi-dwelling unit setup.
Right. So your description, house with EV, separate service, 2 meter charges, currently full meter charges. That would change to be 1 full meter charge and 1 reduced second meter fee.
If the board, goes in that direction. I think one of the things that is important to keep in mind here is when you have, an EV charger on a separate service, many times that is at the call of the contractor that's doing the job. We'll lay out the 2 different scenarios, and what'll happen is, they'll say, well, if we're going to run it off the main panel, we have to upgrade the panel, and they decide to put in a separate service. So is that any different than a detached garage? And so that's some of the thinking that needs to be discussed. And that's probably the biggest one, Brian.
Hmm. So, I'm not I'm not firm on that distinction. I know you said it a few times, so I'm trying to get it. So if we have a line drop to, I'll use Riverwalk as an example because I know they're one of the customers concerned about this. So we have a line drop to each of the homes, and each home has a meter. Because they're single family homes, they're smaller and clustered, but there's no big meter bank. With the garage, there is one line drop to 10 meters for the 10 different the 10 different spots they're parked in. Is that the layout that they have?
So there's definitely different layouts at different places, but for that particular location, the option were to bring it from the main panel out or to install a separate service. And it was decided to go with a separate service because all the panels would have needed to be upgraded in each structure to handle enough load for an EV charger.
And that separate service that goes to that garage building, there's one new service for the building with 10 spots, but we have 10 account holders that each get charged the $6.50.
Well, they, excuse me, they currently get charged the full meter charge.
Yeah, which we've voted that we're going to change it to a second meter fee. But in an apartment building, it's kind of the similar thing where they have a large service coming to a meter bank, and then each customer gets the full meter charge for their account. I'm just trying to make sure that we're collecting for the meter and for the line drop, and that in these scenarios, it makes sense when to apply a second fee because that meter and a line exists.
Yeah, so I think, excuse me, I think the important piece is to make sure that we're consistent, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, when you look at
Simple is better.
when you look at like a main house with a detached garage where they have 2 drops coming in, there's 2 meter charges. So regardless of what the load is, right? So if you have 2 services coming into 2 separate things, we have to be consistent with what we do so that we're not, you know, crossing into rate discrimination.
Right.
So that's the big piece that we need to keep in mind here, or the board does when they vote this through. In terms of the second meter charge, the board did vote on that meter charge at the last meeting, but they did not vote on what it applies to.
Right. And that's what we're doing today.
Correct.
So looking at this house with 4 meters, this is one account or one family, right? You know, living the good life, but it's one family. So if we were to apply a meter charge for the main house and then a second meter fee for the kitchen, the guest house, and pool, would that be an appropriate approach in your eyes to fairly collecting for that setup?
So that setup is very unique, and I think it's the only one that we have set up that way.
I would hope.
Yeah, and quite honestly, you know, just from a safety standpoint, you know, if the fire department has to pull meters, they got to pull 4 meters at one structure. Very unique. So that's kind of a one-off.
But conceptually,
Conceptually, I would say the main house and the kitchen would apply to the lower second meter charge because it's part of the main structure. The guest house would get, you know, a full meter charge just like any other guest house. And the pool, again, separate service, would be a separate account, typically would get a full meter charge as well. But
so any structure that is got beds and bathrooms, you feel should get a full meter charge. Any service to an auxiliary structure, say a garage, a pool, would get the second meter fee.
No, so if it's a separate service to a garage, we have capital infrastructure, it should get the full meter charge, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, so in Riverwalk, you feel that we should have a full meter charge on both the customer's home and the garage.
If we're being consistent, yes.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, but you know, this is what we're here to discuss.
Hey,
Correct.
Brian, can we
Yeah.
try to, this is Warren, can we try to sort of narrow the scope of which things we're debating and try to tick off the ones that seem clear cut in one direction or other, and then come back to issues like the Riverwalk one?
Okay, we can do that. So the primary meter, where someone has just one meter to their house, then they get the standard meter charge.
Yeah, there's nothing to discuss on that one.
Right. When the home, when there's one family, there should be a meter charge for that residence. So the duplex question is maybe next. So if there's a duplex with 2 services and 2 families living in the duplex, there should be 2 full meter charges. That makes sense. Now the scenario down near the bottom where those 2 duplexes were bought and converted back into a single family, but the services were kept. What does the board feel we should charge for that? Should we be charging 2 full meter fees, or should we be charging a full meter fee and a secondary meter fee?
I'm curious how many people we're talking about.
Well,
Because if it's a one-off, I might have a different opinion than if it's a widespread phenomenon. Because
well, I think to Dave's point, we want to be consistent. So we need to kind of create a decision tree that can be applied with not knowing if there's 1 customer or 100 customers, and have it be fair collection. So I don't want to make exemptions in the plan already. I want to kind of create this is the policy, and then we can apply exemptions through requests. Does that make sense, Alice?
I guess what I'm thinking is that I don't want to spend a great deal of time going through a 1-by-1 households, that I'd rather look at the places that apply to 95% of our customers.
Correct.
And make sure we have a clear and consistent policy with those. Each of those other scenarios change over time, and the numbers may go up or down, whether somebody gets 1 meter or 2 meters. I kind of like to set that aside for now, make sure we have a consistent policy for most of our customers that we can all agree to, and then go back and look at the ones that are the one-offs. That would be what I would suggest,
Yeah.
just to focus our conversation.
Warren.
Yeah, I wonder, is the general rule that if there's 1 service into a building and there are 2 meters in the building with 1 building owner, the second meter gets the reduced charge, and that would apply to that 2-family home that's converted, that would apply to an EV service in an attached garage. If there are 2 structures with 2 different lines going into each one, like a house and a detached garage, or a house and a pool house, or a house and a guest house, each one of those gets a full meter charge. Does that make sense as a general principle?
The purpose of making the second meter fee was to address complaints about a single household getting 2 full meter charges, because the reason that they were complaining is that it's $18 and not $7, because we're doing fixed collection for that distribution, the fixed distribution expenses, and we keep raising that. So the cost to service a meter in many areas. If we had mostly variable collection, meter fees would be back down at, $5 to $8. And then if we had a second meter, we'd be collecting 2 of those, and that makes complete sense. But because we've moved from the variable collection to a fixed collection, and we've used the same line item of meter charge as a fixed method, that's where we're over collecting, and a second meter fee should apply to reduce that over collection. So I feel that homes, if we have one household, that they should be getting 1 meter fee, and if they have a second meter that's not sub-metered for a program, they should get the $6.50 second meter fee.
So Brian, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
So in your philosophy there, are you not taking into account the capital infrastructure to feed the second meter? And just saying
I am. We went last time we met, we came up with $6.50 to cover the cost of the meter and the cost of the line drop. Now, the account management is already collected for in having the one account, and the additional, the $18 is so high because we're collecting for all of the salaries and trucks and so forth in that fixed collection method. Like we could change the terminology and say that we have the old $7 account fee, and then we have the $6.50 applied to every meter that's not under a sub-meter program, and then we have a separate account fee, which is just to have an account. That's our fixed collection method. So we collect, $10.50 in that fee. Do people understand what I described?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about revenue and that sort of thing, and that hasn't been part of the conversation, but we have plenty of parcels that have multiple line drops, and you're collecting multiple meter charges. So we drop those off. There's going to be a revenue drop, and I don't know the number in front of me because I have to run a report, but it's something that is crossing my mind right now.
Yeah, I think that came up previously, and we had asked to understand the scope of the financial impact. So we do need that information to understand if this is a $100,000 change or if this is a $500,000 change.
Yeah, I don't think it's a $1 million change by any means, but it's something we have to factor in when we run the numbers and do the budget.
Yes, go ahead, Matt.
I just wanted to point out that the $6.50 charge does not really cover the line drop, any of the capital for the line drop. I think we set that rate at the cost of the meter plus a little bit of the billing costs on top of it.
We were divided between collecting just for the meter and collecting for the meter and the meter drop, and the compromise was a value in between. So it didn't have to do with billing, but it had to do with collecting something for the line drop, but not. Yeah, so that was the discussion last time we met. Bianca or John, what are your thoughts on how we should apply a second meter fee?
I guess I agree with where Warren was going. I feel like we need some criteria here that are going to be applied and can be applied kind of through each of these alternatives.
Well, that's what we're trying to establish today. What is that criteria?
I mean, I feel like the criteria should be something along the lines of, if a customer or someone who's acting on a customer's behalf makes a deliberate decision to install a second meter, then they should be responsible for the cost of that second meter.
What if a developer builds a building that utilizes a second meter and they just purchase the property that way.
I think that's a case where a decision was made to configure the house in a certain way such that they were going to avoid having to upgrade a panel, and they, made a deliberate decision to kind of, install a second meter or to keep a second meter. And that what would apply in the duplex scenario where they decided to not move to a single meter.
So we created the whole so it defeats the purpose of creating the second meter fee.
No, I think the purpose of the second meter fee is to address the issue of $18 wasn't an appropriate charge for the second meter fee. And I feel like we've remedied that. And, we're now talking at about $6.50. So if we've moved from $18 to $6.50, I think that we've got the costs closer to right.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand your comment correctly. So if we look at the scenario where we had that duplex converted into a single family home and they kept both services, should they be charged two $18.50 charges, or should they be charged one $18.50 and one $6.50?
One, what I would call, and I've proposed this before, I feel like the first meter charge should be known as a customer charge. And within that customer charge should be the cost of the meter. And then I propose that if there's a second meter, there'd be an explicit second meter charge. So that customer who has 2 meters would receive a customer charge within which there'd be a cost of 1 meter. And then there'd be a second charge for a second meter.
Okay, all right. So we are on the same page. I thought that you were saying that we should have two $18 charges. Okay.
No.
All right. Bianca, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with both you and was that John. Yeah. I think I like the idea of a customer charge. And then actually, I mean, in as far as the second meter, and I think we're talking more broadly, generically, that structure works. But I do think that for example, if it's for an EV charging station, I think it's, I'm not sure that second meter charge should exist. If you want to cover the fixed cost, just pay the $200, have the customer pay the $200 for that additional meter, but not sure it makes sense for us to charge to, penalize, for that EV charge. In fact, I think the full cost for a month of charging for some people is going to be about $10. So even the $6 is going to be a significant increase in the cost of fuel for the vehicle.
Yeah, you weren't able to attend our last meeting. So
and I'll withdraw my comments there. Just since it was decided, I'm happy to go with whatever the board has decided.
All right. So you would generally agree with John, his description of a customer would get a $18 charge in the first meter fee, and then a secondary meter fee of $6.50. Versus, ideally you'd like to see just a $200 install fee and then be done with it and only 1 meter charge. But given where we are, a second meter fee applies. Is that a good summary of your position? I see you saying the word yes and shaking your head. So
yeah, that is correct.
All right. Alice, what are you in agreement with that idea, or?
I am. Okay. I'm in agreement because what I'm interested in is a single charge per customer, as customers are the shareholders of the light plant. And that's the approach that I'd like to take. And then adding a second meter fee and reduced cost seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, that's better wording than I've been using. That's good. The share of per customer.
And that's what the meter charge is.
Right. Well, that was the reason that we've gone through this process, is that people were paying 2 shares because they had 2 meters.
Right.
And they couldn't pay only 1 share, because then it wouldn't collect for the meter itself. So that's where the second meter charge, that's what got us here, which is great. Warren?
Brian, real quick, just to make sure we're all on the same page and we're all clear, a lot of the second meter charges are because they have a second account. So when you go to a parcel, and you want to go 1 meter charge per customer, right now it's set up per account. So this would be a deviation from that if that's what the board votes on. And would that apply to, the detached garage, the pool house, the guest house? And that's the question at play. Now, we also have customers that have multimeters with sub-meters that don't get a meter charge on some of the sub-meters. And so that's where it starts getting more complicated.
Absolutely. We haven't made it that far, but we're at 95% of scenarios. Well, maybe 90% of scenarios, because we do have a lot of sub-meter programs. Warren, on the 90% question, where we have, the customer meter fee to cover their share, and then if they have an auxiliary meter that they've decided to install, or their developers decided to install, that second meter would be at $6.50.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so I think all of us are on that train of thought. Now, when we talk about sub-meter programs, so ETS or others, they currently have no second meter fee, and that is because they're part of this program that required a meter be installed. For now, I think we should continue that policy, but as we go to time of use, this metering structure may change. Those programs will hopefully go away and will become more of a simple rate structure without these special rate programs. So at that point, we can readdress the metering charges for second meter. Does that feel like a good course of action for today from board members? Warren.
Yeah, that seems good with me, but I want to go back to Dave's comments before about, is there a distinction between a lot of these scenarios where people have one account versus two accounts? Do a lot of these folks have one account and a lot of them have two accounts?
And also, I'd like to add to Warren's question.
And so then let me ask, so in that case, if the folks have two accounts, does that mean they should get two full meter charges because of the added expense of the light plant of servicing two accounts versus one account?
That has been the way it's been set up. If they have two accounts, it's a meter charge per account. And in many cases, it's because we have capital infrastructure coming into that particular location. On a customer that has multimeters because of a program we have, those multimeters, a lot of them are sub-meters. They're underneath the main meter, and the second meters didn't get the meter charge.
Yeah, so does that then suggest that if we're doing it by a customer charge and a meter charge, sort of as John suggested before, if there are two accounts, they're in effect two customers?
I want to ask a clarifying question, because the accounts are created based on meter being installed, but the bill that's sent out can show multiple accounts in one billing. So, for example, I have a meter for EV charging, and I have a meter for the house for solar. I see that I have an account ending in 2, and then my other account ends in 3, but I get one bill. So I want to make sure the terminology we're using of accounts and customer shares are not equal. And I want to make sure that we clarify how they're not equal. So, for example, I have 002 account, and I have 001 account, and those are the different meters, but I get one bill and I pay one meter fee. So when we talk about this, I want to make sure we're each customer is paying one share, as Alice put it, and that we're not charging the same customer two shares, because that goes back to the core complaint, which is you're collecting the fixed collection method twice on me. And that's why we created the second meter charge.
I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is, we go back to the simple example of the detached garage. We have a line drop to that garage that we have to maintain. Storm comes through, we have to put it back up. There's cost there, right? And it's been practice in the industry to charge a second meter charge for that. So if we're taking that off, then you know.
Correct, but the other utilities would charge like two $7 fees for each meter, and then most of the maintenance of the distribution network would be collected in the variable usage. An EV may not use a lot of kilowatt hours in a month, and if we shift it from variable collection to fixed collection, they're paying more than their share, as Alice put it. That's what we're trying to solve. Bianca.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think we covered the fact that the second meter charge covers the costs, right? So it's not the second lower meter charge isn't, it's lower, and it's fixed, covers the cost of what Dave's worried about. And then I think there's a subcategory of that, which would be like the EV charging stations, which we could put as exempt or lower or whatever. But like as a general rule, we could just say, I just want to make sure it's a question I want to make sure I understood. So in the last meeting, it was voted to have a lower second meter charge, correct?
Correct.
So if that's the case, then I think the question now is, as far as I understand, who does it apply to? And I was just suggesting, probably shouldn't apply to EV charging stations, because of that would just disincentivize having it, because what you use in the charge for the, and I'm assuming this would be very few, right? It would just be a handful of them. But I could be wrong. So that's a point of clarification there, but I generally agree with the comments that have been coming in. I think they're consistent. I think we're differing on very specific exceptions to the rule.
Well, yeah, so let me ask Dave, where would you apply the second meter fee? Now that you have the tool, where would you, because the board seems to want to apply it in one way, and you keep putting in words of caution about what we're trying to do. So I want to understand, where would you use that fee?
If I could interrupt, I'm sorry. I need to leave to get to my meeting. I'm very sorry. I defer to whatever folks decide.
Thank you, Warren. Dave, where would you utilize it?
That's, hearing the conversation from the board, what I'm hearing is it's more of, you're looking for the main meter charge, and then if you have a second meter, it's the second meter charge. If that's applied, then I think it just needs to be consistent, and that's where my caution comes into play. So, if you're going to apply a second meter charge to an EV, then you have to consider that for a detached garage. You can't have one way and one another way, because that's rate discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So if the board's leaning in that direction to apply it that way, then that's fine. If you're looking to apply a second meter charge for one scenario, not another, then that's where my caution comes into play.
Correct. So I think we're consistent in our view that we want every customer or every, let's say, family, paying, the fixed collection, that $18 charge. But when there's more meters installed on the property, that they should have that second meter fee. Now, we can easily apply that as the basic tenets of how we apply the metering, but that would make that large home with 4 meters be one $18 charge and 3 second meter fees, and it would reduce the fixed collection this year, and that we would have to adjust for that. So other than those 2 points of caution from you, what else am I missing?
So I don't agree with a second meter charge for a guest house. I think that should be a full meter charge. 'Cause
Okay.
that's a full account. That's where I am on that one. I do agree, if the board's going down this path, that sub meters shouldn't have a second meter charge because they're under the main meter, so that's covered there. So again, we just
Okay.
need to be consistent with this. And
I think you did a good summary, though, of how we could apply this, and it would reduce this year's fixed collection for the handful of customers that are currently paying 2 full meter fees. But that application of a full meter charge per house, meaning guest house and house, and then a second meter fee for pools, EV charging, other auxiliary line drops for other detached structures or pools. I don't know if a pool is detached or not. Does that give you kind of a simple guidance to go by that you think you can implement?
well, I don't think it's simple.
Okay.
I will say that, because when you look at the scenario that I just talked about, a main house and a guest house, one can argue, how's that any different than a main house and a detached garage? Right? And so that's where you start to get into some consistency issues.
Could we say any line drop to a structure that has a bedroom,
Serves as a living space.
a living space, would receive a full meter charge, and any line drop to a detached garage or non-living structure would get a second meter fee. And any account would have a meter fee by default, at least. So for example, if someone creates an account just for the garage, they're not going to not pay the first meter fee and just pay the second at $6.50. So there has to be some clause in there that says, if you have a shed in the woods and you don't live there, but we've got a line drop out there, you're going to pay the full meter charge, even though it's, just a shed in the woods that you don't live in. Does that make sense? I mean, we're trying to give you guiding principles, and I know implementation is always sticky because reality is more complex, but giving a policy of where to apply it with that kind of outline, does that?
That is helpful.
Okay. Alice.
I just want us to be mindful that we can obviously see that there will be a revenue change to the light plant by a widespread second meter fee that drops the cost of what a resident has already been paying. So in our calculations, at some point, we are going to have to look at, are we collecting enough in the main meter fee to cover the fixed cost of the light plant? Because were we collecting above and beyond what we needed through the second meter fee? So from a customer standpoint, we may have to raise the meter fee to absorb some of the costs that we have now applied against the second meter in the house.
So that is understood. I think that the impact of this change is not going to be, as Dave put it, it's not going to be $1 million. It's going to be, maybe $100,000. But that's something that is within our ability to manage. And then next year's rates will adjust accordingly.
Just to be clear, I didn't say 100,000.
Yeah, I know.
$500,000.
Yeah.
I thought that the second meter fee covered the cost. It was a cost based analysis that was.
Yeah, it covers it. It's the compromise between the line drop and the cost of the meter and the cost of the meter only. So it's not fully for the line drop and meter, nor is it's kind of collecting more than just the cost of the meter. So that was how we set the pricing in the last meeting. But the what it is, it's about that equal share. It's about that fixed collection method, not impacting multiple households. And that's where we're currently collecting 2 shares from some customers, that we're going to start collecting 1 share. We're going to see a revenue drop from that.
which we may have to make up in some other place.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be large enough to really.
And it sounds like this was just a handful of homes, right?
Yeah, so this I know Riverwalk previously, each person paid 1 share, and about a year ago they started paying 2 shares, and now we're going to pay a second meter fee and a single share. The number of homes that have 2 line drops isn't. What percentage of homes would you say, Dave? Are we looking at 1%? Are we looking at 5%? But we're not looking at 10.
No, I don't have a good number on that, Brian. It's so much change in the town with, buildings being demoed and rebuilt and that sort of thing. It's a smaller percentage for sure. I don't have it on the top of my head though.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna try to summarize so we can do a straw vote on the general policy that we asked Dave to go forward with. Dave, do you want to write this down and come back to us for a quick vote on what you feel we've said today, or would you rather I summarize and do a vote now?
Why don't you summarize it and then just follow up to make sure that all the board is in the same agreement or not.
Okay.
And then you can vote it through and we'll.
All right.
And the other thing too is the effective date is going to be important.
Yeah, I think I know that this has been an ongoing question for quite a while from customers, so I would like to get an effective date as soon as we could. But let me summarize first. All right, so a meter fee, a full meter customer charge, or what are we calling it? The full meter fee, the $18 will apply to line drops that go to structures that have living area or living space. I want to say bedroom, because I think of my shed as living space, but it's not. I don't live out here, right? I just have a small office. So customer charge minimum, every account has one. And if there are 2 line drops and people have bedrooms there, a second full $18 would apply. If there is a line drop to a structure that people don't live in, like a garage, a pool, that would receive the second meter fee, currently $6.50. Any second meters or separate line drops or any separate meters that are sub-metered are exempt from additional fees. Is that a good summary, Dave?
Yeah, I'm writing it down.
Okay. And does the board agree that that's a good way to apply these meter fees?
I agree, but I'm going to offer language.
Thank you, because
That's fine. In the parlance of the planning board that has to look at these things, as they are looking at design and changes to homes, we have alternative dwelling units, an ADU, and that's what we're talking about as being a second meter fee, because you've got 2 dwellings basically. And then other buildings like the shed, like a garage, like a detached whatever, is considered an accessory building. And that does not have a living accommodation to it, but that's the language that's used by the planning board. And it might be useful for us to apply the same language in describing what we're talking about here. Does that make sense?
I like it. Yeah. All right, and the final thought would be that if it is a sub meter, that there would be no additional meter fee. All right, and we can come back to this once we've implemented time of use and see if anything changes based on that overriding rate. Is that clear, Dave?
It's clear to me. I think, the piece that I need to talk to staff is about implementation.
Yes,
So,
and we can do a follow-up in our October meeting
right,
about that.
that would be helpful. I mean, you guys can vote on this now if you'd like, and then I can talk to staff about the amount of time it's going to take to implement and make sure that everyone understands the vote and how it applies. But I think Alice's comments are helpful.
Yeah, I think that language is helpful. Alice, do you have another comment?
I just have a quick comment. I want to just make sure we're all on the same page on this as well. I believe we voted or decided in spirit at the last meeting that these new rates are not retroactive. They are rates that are going forward.
Yeah, I disagreed with that, but you're right. That is the decision of the board. Just a quick straw poll. We can do a formal vote if we need to next month. Bianca, does this summary make sense to you? And do you agree with it?
Yeah, I think we would face some equity issues if this is not retroactive. So that's going to be, we're going to get some angry customers and some people who bought, electrical vehicles that we're planning to spend $5 a month charging, and they're spending double that, or I'm just saying, I think we're going to get some pushback, and then we're going to have to revisit this. So unless this is, and I think that as far as I understand, it's just really a handful of homes, and that the overall impact is limited on revenue. So it probably, unless we want to open this can of worms again in about 3 months, we should probably just make it retroactive.
Okay. So Dave, I think what would be helpful at the next meeting is not only talking to staff about implementing this and how easy or hard it would be, but also explaining the revenue impacts, number of customers that this will apply to, so that we can answer that question. I had already conceded the retroactive on the last meeting, but Bianca has also.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I'll just defer to whatever was decided last time, but I'll just putting on the table.
It's very
open up the worms for just $10,000. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's difficult to do a retroactive rate, right? Because the rates are applied at the DPU, they're there. And so to do a retroactive thing on rates is not an easy thing. So usually it's forward facing.
Okay. John, the summary done 2 minutes or 5 minutes ago, do you agree that that's a good summary?
I support that approach. Yep.
Okay, great. All right. We will come around and close this out at our next meeting. And Dave will talk with staff about implementing this. And if we need to talk through any scenarios, that I would hope that we'd have some materials in advance of the meeting to kind of read through it prior. That way we can be more focused on our discussion.
Are we going to have a formal vote on it now, today?
No, I think we'll do that at the next meeting in October. Okay. When we have some of that background information. And Dave, do you mind resending this document you're sharing?
Yep, not a problem.
All right. Great. And a side note, Dave, I went to the Lightboard webpage to go find the meeting packet that was shared in last time, and found that the old meeting packets are being removed. Could we retain 12 months of meeting packets on the website? That way we can find those materials when we need.
Yeah, that's what we want to do. We're working through some kinks for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to move on to the next discussion, which is Renewable Energy Credit Fund. I wanted to bring this up because we are at the point where we're starting to reach 100%, and we've never really written down a formal policy on how we manage this. We've got agreements on how we've gone forward step by step, but I was hoping to get a policy document from staff that kind of outlines what we're doing. So let's have that discussion. Dave, do you want to take this, or is Laura here?
Laura's not on. I'll take it. So hopefully the board members all received the memo that was put together back in 2017 on how we started this process and the concept at the time. You know, it was based on a bunch of assumptions at the time, and some of it hasn't played out the same way. Currently, embedded in the energy charge is 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's what brings in the revenue to buy renewable energy credits. When that was voted through by the board, it was said that that revenue would be used to buy renewable energy credits and retire them, or the money could be used to buy into a carbon-free project like solar, wind, hydro, whatever the case is. So it wasn't solely just for renewable energy credits, albeit at the time and even today, it is used for renewable energy credits. And we still continue to go into new clean power options. And if you look back at my report that I sent yesterday, you'll see, you know, we have come a long way in terms of buying into projects that have renewable credits or carbon-free credits, and that continues to increase. And in 2025, I believe, will be around 80% on contract. And so as we approach that, you know, the board has a couple different things that can be done. And Brian's right, we don't have a formal policy written right now. We have that memo as a guide for what we follow. And we haven't had to implement the entire the stuff in the that memo. I think it went up to 2.5 cents would be the top, and we're at 2 cents. You're muted, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, the memo went up to no, it actually didn't. It didn't talk. Oh, it did. It went up to 3 cents in the memo for collection. But
oh, correct. Yep. And so we haven't had to go there to this point, which is a great thing. And if we were to go up to like the 2 cents, you know, we're pulling in about 3.2 million in revenue, and that's used to buy the renewable energy credits to clean up the power supply. But as we transition to the new contracts, we're not going to need 3.2 million to clean up the power supply. And so we would start to have an excess set aside for projects, or if contracts dropped off to buy more renewable energy credits. But as in anything else, that would create another fund that we'd have to have a fund balance policy on, which we currently do not. There's no policy that says we're going to have X amount. And I think Matt's going to jump in here in a second.
I can
kind of
see
go
it.
over some of the details.
So we do have a policy, but there is no cap. There is no cap on the amount of funds that we can keep, or there's no restriction on there's no cap on it. Essentially, I'll read the language. It says we can use the monies to acquire and retire renewable energy certificates, which we all know, and then any costs associated with increasing the amount of renewable energy in the plant's power portfolio.
Yeah. So now that we're at the point where we're reaching full offset, and we're over collecting revenue for this offset, the question in my mind is, if we continue to keep it at 2 cents, and then we get to this 80% contracted, and we're collecting a lot of extra funds into this account without a cap, that money is set aside for maintaining 100%, which is its purpose. Because remember, the price of a rec can jump between $20 a megawatt to $65 a megawatt, and it does it very quickly. And so we don't want rate shock going to our customers where we want to keep 100%, and suddenly we have to do 6.5 cents per kilowatt. That's the point of having this reserve, is to manage that. The use for clean energy projects, I think we should not do that, because we do it in our normal course of action. I don't want the future boards to say, oh, well, we haven't got the money in this specific fund to do an in-town solar project, so we're going to continue to delay until that accumulates. I would prefer that this be simply about managing rate shock and maintaining that 100% offset. But I want to hear from other board members, because I don't want people limited in the future based on, this reserve fund. Bianca, or Dave, do you have a comment on that? Dave, you
Yeah.
look like.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, as I looked at this over the last week or so, I think it's important that, make it, and it should be clear that the board can reduce that 2 cents at any time. So as we go through our forecast, if we have $250,000 in excess in a fund and we don't want to continue to build that, we could lower that down, still have a reserve if things kind of get out of control. But we're not over collecting from the ratepayers when we don't need it.
And that was why I came up with the $500,000 cap, is to trigger the decision to go from 2 cents to 1.5. When that reserve is at some point, that would trigger the reduction. That's the only purpose of that. But the language of use for other green projects, kind of, I'm concerned that in the future they'll focus on that and not do things. And I want to make sure that we do things no matter the funding in this fund or not. And I've taken Bianca's wind, because I said she could speak and then I called on you. So Bianca, what's your thoughts?
Well, I love everything about this discussion. I'm glad I'm so grateful we have this and we're doing it, and that we're, that we have such a good problem as having met the over collected effectively. My focus is more on, what projects are we moving forward? So you talked about, you don't want to put the money aside because you want the board to keep, and the CMLP to keep moving on investment. Is there a process or a target that we have to get to 100% renewable production, so that we are, either buying from carbon-free sources such as nuclear, which has its own bag of tricks off to the side, but it is carbon-free. And other, I think, Brian, at some point, there was I don't know if it was a discussion or there was rumor of something, a 2229 being a big battery storage possibility to put, little battery there. Is any of that on the table? And are we moving forward on any of that?
Yeah, that was the 229 was an idea that's been floating around. It's not in any kind of plan or specific in the roadmap. The solar task force is trying to transition between the agreement that we're going to do projects like this to actually making a roadmap with deadlines of when we're going to do it and where we're going to do it. Okay. So they kind of took that portion away from the board and are working on it. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, sort of. And what's their timeline on producing a strategy or coming up with a strategy?
I forget at the moment, but I think it's before the next town meeting or the end of this year. Actually, no, probably mid next year, because they need time to work on it. I mean, they're getting close.
Okay.
But they're on an, as soon as they can do it kind of process. Dean is very much on concluding that process so that we can move forward in action.
And when do we vote on how much more nuclear we add to the portfolio? Or is that on the table for discussion?
So Dave comes to us with different PPA options that are made available through E&E. I know nuclear options are usually available. The board has expressed concern about too much nuclear power in the portfolio. We were going to have a public forum, but that didn't happen, and probably should, to go over this topic and others. Dave, your thoughts on that? I can see you're gonna. I can tell when you have something to say because you kind of move.
No, I think a public forum is still a good thing. We didn't
Yeah.
push it during the summer because we don't like to do those in the summer when people are on vacation and stuff. So it's something that we should consider. Primarily at this point, we don't have any new contracts in front of us for nuclear, but they will come up. And I'd rather be proactive and ahead of the scenario than reacting on the spot, whether we're going to, buy into it or not.
Yeah, I would agree. And John, you've been very patient. Thank you. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it just seems like there's a couple of questions here. One is there's a power supply portfolio question. And I feel like, I guess one thing I need to understand as a new board member is what's the board's role with respect to offering advice on that? I mean, does the solar task force preempt the board with respect to those decisions? Okay.
No.
Well, I think that's an important area for the board to have some discussions at some point. Because, I think it should be a portfolio, right? It's not appropriate to put all our eggs in one basket. And, excuse me, I clearly have some views there. But with respect to, the 2 cents per kilowatt hour, I think what would be appropriate there would be to do some modeling around what is the underlying variability of REC prices, and recognizing that a portion of our portfolio is, that the REC component has already been established, right? We're only subject to variability for when we have to go into the market to purchase RECs. And I think that one could come up with reasonable assumptions regarding what's the variability of REC prices. And, right now, Massachusetts has an alternative compliance cap of $40 a megawatt hour. Connecticut does too. So it's reasonable to expect that REC prices aren't going to be any higher than $40. So that reduces some of the variability. So I would think that type of analysis would be appropriate to say, okay, here's an appropriate cap. And, be more than happy to kind of be a little more explicit in terms of how that could be done. But I'm sure Matt has some ideas in terms of how to implement something like that. Just some thoughts here.
But just a point to what John just talked about, the $40. We just, in the recent purchase, they were $39. So they're right up against that $40 cap. And, that's the highest they've been for us in purchasing. So we don't expect them to go above the 40 for reasons what John explained. The other thing too is as we look at this, and if you look at that second chart that I provided, in 25 and 26, we're going to have the portfolios up to about 80% hedged, right? And so the goal has always been from the board to have, around 20% open. So we'd have to buy RECs for 20% at the end of the year regardless, because we don't want to over purchase, because then we end up selling it back at a loss and it costs the ratepayers money. So the philosophy has always been to keep it around 20%. We've gone down to 15 before, but as long as we have that wiggle room, it's just some points that I think are important.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing that chart?
Sure.
That people can see it again, because I think it's important. So it looks like we're about 36% nuclear currently. And as you can see, as our other contracts kick in, that we are reducing our reliance on individual or unbundled REC purchases, which is the goal. The goal is to use unbundled to get to 100% and then keep adding contracts that are long duration, that we have the generation and the rec associated and bundled. But there will always be that 20% that is exposed that we'll need to do purchases for.
Yeah, so 27, 28, and 29, the forecast has us with 20% open. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
But that's intentional,
Yes.
keeping that 20% open so that we can be in the market when there are opportunities.
Yeah.
Well,
Should,
one of the things I would add, and we've done this in the past, but it's important to get out there, is if a clean project came available in 26, 27, and 28, we typically would go into it and cut into that 20%, knowing that other projects are going to drop off. So we have a little bit of risk there in terms of maybe over buying for a year, but we're into a project that's going to help in, the 20, 30 plus years. So, and we've done that before, and we'd recommend doing that again if we had the opportunity. So,
yeah, I think that's what we've done in the past, and it's worked very well. I mean, back in 2010, we were 97% natural gas contracts. So we've really done a great transition here. I had one more comment about the rec fund, and I've forgotten it. Any other board members want to share thoughts or opinions? John, you are a great person to help us draft this document about how do we manage maintaining 100% clean energy without rate shock when rec prices change or other things happen. So I might send you some documents to ask you to kind of help me write up, because that's what I hope that the next meeting that we can have a document in front of us that says this is how we're going to manage all of this stuff as a policy statement.
So Brian, I would suggest that we put a document together,
Okay.
staff, for the board to review and suggest changes. That would make the most sense, and we certainly can do that for the next meeting if
Yeah.
the board wants.
That'd be appreciated. We could do that. I have one more topic to discuss related to this. The state, the Mass DEP, does a retail sellers report on emissions, and the way it's structured, according to Laura, I haven't dug into this level of detail, but according to Laura, it's 0 emissions for the kilowatt hours sold, not the kilowatt hours purchased. And that's about a 5% difference from line losses. So I want to ask the board members conceptually, should we follow the state's method of trying to hit 100% of megawatts with non-emitting RECs certificates retired, or should we increase that to 105% to account for the line losses that don't necessarily have attributed emissions? Does that make sense? Like, because the larger value is the purchased number versus the sold number, and which is our 100% emissions-free target? The state's sold target, or should it be our purchase target?
So just so the board's all on the same page, it's been, we follow the sales per the state, and that's what we currently do.
Yeah. Matt, you raised your hand real quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the 5% includes losses as well as self-use, mainly at the admin building here.
Yeah, so self-use would be unmetered buildings like the light plants building itself, and the line losses would be the inefficiencies of delivering power to customers. But
our building is metered, it's just not billed because we can't bill ourselves.
Okay, all right. So what are board members' thoughts on the 100% target? Should it be on purchased or on sold? Sold is what the state tracks currently. I'm going to
Why wouldn't we do that?
Why wouldn't we do what?
track it against the state's metrics.
The theory has been brought up that that 6% of losses still have emissions that don't have certificates retired against them. And if our goal is to state that we are 100%, that's technically not. But the state is focused on, we're following the state's method, so we're not doing purchases currently. So do you want to keep with what the state is doing, or do we want to be a little different and spend more? John, your thoughts?
I mean, I would say as an aspiration, it would be appropriate to cover the full electricity requirements. It doesn't mean we necessarily need to get there in 2024 or 2025, but I think that ultimately that's where we should be.
Bianca, your thoughts? I think we lost.
Sorry, I'm on the line with Thoreau. I'm so sorry, with the Thoreau Elementary. Just a moment.
All right, go ahead. All right, so I think right now we're going to keep with the state's process when we write up the policy document, and maybe we'll come back to it when we feel aspirational, as John put it.
The good news is we're going to have enough revenue to do either.
Right.
Whether we follow the state like we currently do, or if the board decides to go on purchases, we currently will have enough revenue based on the graph that I showed previously.
Yeah.
So
it would be nice to have that revenue to do an in-town project or do storage versus that additional aspirational effort. But I understand. Bianca, you got distracted by Thoreau, but did you hear the conversation about 100% target for purchases versus sold, which the state reports on sold kilowatt hours? So what are your thoughts? Should we be aspirational and go for purchases, or should we stick with the current method and 100% emissions free for sold kilowatts?
So I apologize. I don't understand the terminology. I don't understand the process, but it seems I like the word aspirational. So whatever that policy was, it's where I'm going to be. So meaning like, I want us to be using, I mean, I think the rec market is a great incentive structure, subsidy incentive structure, but I'd love for us to just be producing clean energy or buying directly from clean energy producers. But I'm not sure I fully understand the nuances of what that means.
And this is deep in the weeds, my question. So, all right. I think we'll write up staff will write up a policy document, and it will mirror the state's process and put in our discussions about what we do with excess collection. And we'll come back to that at our next meeting. Does that sound good, Dave?
Yeah, great.
I think that concludes this discussion topic. We are only 4 minutes over, and I would like to open it up for public comments. So if you could raise your hand, Phil.
Good morning. Sorry about the feedback there earlier, audio feedback. A couple things. One is Concord Light in a long-term program of undergrounding power lines?
Yes.
Okay. And where is how far along are they? What percent of the lines are on underground and on plan to be underground?
I'll let Dave answer that one.
So we're just over 50% converted to underground right now. We collect revenue per Mass General Law, Chapter 166 on each bill, and we can collect up to 2% on the surcharge. We currently collect 1.5%. That brings in an annual revenue around $400,000, maybe $420,000 on a good year, and that gets put into the underground fund. and that money gets used to convert. We currently have a large system of conduits installed without wires right now, and we're building the fund to convert those areas. So it's a slow process, if I'm being honest, but it has been an effective process as well. So.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
And how does Concord Light think about the above ground versus underground when there's that additional current a more recent risk of flooding? Are the underground conduits waterproof?
No, they're not. And all the stuff that's designed and built that are in manholes, they're waterproof, but they're not. So they can stand water, but as we know, water gets into stuff over time. We do have some wet areas that we have underground fully deployed, and we have stuff that's submerged in water daily. So it does work, but I'd be a fool to tell you that water doesn't get into some cables here and there, because it does.
And really the question is it squirrel proof? Because they love to burrow down in those things.
So, Jason's talked about squirrels with fiber.
Yeah.
Before fiber, they were eating streetlight wire and conduits. And so who knows what it is, but there's no nutritional value in the insulation, but they seem to like it.
All right, Phil, is that all your questions?
The other thing was really directed at Jason, and this is along the same lines of resiliency. The fiber will continue to work if the residence has an uninterruptible power supply in the building. This is true for almost I think more than 90% of the residents. That will be the case, and I believe I spoke to Jason a couple of months ago about this. I believe that to be true, and if it is true, from a resiliency point of view, it might be good or I suggest that in a bill insert or in some sort of monthly newsletter, just let customers know that if they want to have continuous fiber, have a continuous internet access, to buy a UPS, so that at least their router and ONT continues to get power.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and they'll reduce our ability to understand who has power and lost power during a storm, though. But I'm joking.
Only until the meters are installed.
That's into the AMS system, and then they're all going to be able to do it themselves. Pamela.
Pamela, 13 Concord Green. I really appreciate being able to see the handouts and information in the meeting packets. Can you please put them on the website permanently and put links to them into the agenda, like you put the link to the YouTube page for the Lightboard media recordings? Thank you very much. But I went there and they're out of order and they can't be searched easily. So it starts with recordings of 2020. And then it jumps to 23 and 21, and it's hard to find. It would be really nice to have permanent links to those on the CMLP town website as well, please.
We agree, Pamela, and we're working on it. We found the same issues that you're describing right now when we were going through it. So,
I mean, I remember trying to look for a specific Lightboard meeting that I'd missed. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's Minuteman Media Network is in control of organizing the YouTube channel, so that's the difficulty, and they're working on it.
Yeah. And can we put? I'm worried when you have a cap on a fund like the rec purchase fund. I do not think we should have one, because like David said, we do need funds for clean infrastructure projects that we're building. And those shouldn't be just for recs. Recs, so in order to avoid rate shock, when we have projects like we have for the solar and battery for the new middle school, we could use that money if we have any left over for that.
I think, Pamela, that's exactly what everybody on the board was saying. Everybody's in agreement.
Exactly.
You want
Like you said,
project.
and
And-
specifically, we need to. I think we should have a fund for those things too, because, for example, we need to stop spending money on fossil fuel school bus infrastructure, since we need to electrify that immediately because it benefits the whole clean generation project to have electric school buses and the vehicle to grid infrastructure, which makes them into mobile batteries.
Yeah, thank you.
And
All right.
but one more thing. When you put so much of the infrastructure costs of the light plant into fixed meter charges instead of into the variable electric charge, you end up overburdening a lot of people. Like if a supermarket or a Starbucks charged a cover fee for every customer to cover their building costs, no matter how much food or coffee they bought, that would be unfair. And particularly, it discourages customer investment in solar and battery and heat pump and EV installations because they can't save money when they still have to pay all the fixed charges and they don't get the benefit of reducing their electricity buying. So it discourages the installation of those. When every time a customer invests in those sorts of things, those are investments in producing green energy that the light plant doesn't have to make.
Yeah,
We need to encourage that.
As you know, we've had extensive discussions previously about that, and that. So I hear you, Pamela, but I want to let people go if there isn't new questions to be asked.
Well, one thing I think you should consider is when you have the structure for what you charge the main meter and what you charge sub meters, you could also exempt specific uses. For example, in multi-unit dwellings, when they have to have a separate meter for EV charging because the garages aren't near, like at Riverwalk, I think you should exempt them from any charges.
Yeah. Okay.
As an EV adoption incentive, which is extremely fair and gets around the whole issue of what's fair. We have EV incentives in all kinds of ways.
Pamela, I need to cut you off because you've been talking for 5 minutes and we do want to get going. You have any new topics to bring up?
Just consider exempting them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Because that also 310 Baker Avenue, the new building with.
Again, you're lecturing and I would like to move on. I'm sorry, Pamela. All right. Thank you. Is there any other public comments? John.
Just an administrative matter. I'm just wondering if it's possible to send out a meeting invite, which would have for each of the scheduled meeting dates for board members, which would have a link to the Zoom that we're going to be using for the meeting. It just would keep it in our calendars and would simplify things on my end.
Yep, we can send out a calendar invite.
Great.
I won't put the Zoom stuff in there until we get closer because we're planning to go to hybrid meetings at some point. And I'll add that information in as we get closer.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Seeing no more questions, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Great. John? Yes or
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
Alice?
Yes.
And Bianca?
Yes.
And I agree as well. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Good day. Bye.